Now, here's a story that has not really made its rounds the way you would think that it should have, considering the kind of society we live in today and how certain people of a certain group like to champion behind certain things and make waves and whatnot in all of the name of progression. But we have this person whose name is, well, what they go by, or what they went by at least, Amber McLaughlin, whose original name was Scott, was born a man, then transitioned. And I'm trying to figure out at what point did they transition, considering what story I'm about to tell you. Well, they have made history as becoming the first openly transgendered person to be giving the lethal cocktail for a murder that they committed back in 2003 of their ex while they were still living as a man, which I'm trying to figure out how in the world did they transition? Like, who paid for that, for them to transition while they were locked up? Because I can't believe they actually transitioned while they was on the outside. Mind you, this was back in 2003. But it's amazing to me how people, I guess, in that community have not really spoken really much about not only them being the first openly trans person to be executed for a crime like that, but also the crime in which they committed. But then again, many of them really didn't talk too much about when Bruce Lynn Jenner did what he did. But that's another story for another day. Missouri carried out the first known U.S. execution of an openly transgender person Tuesday when Amber McLaughlin, who was convicted of a 2003 murder and unsuccessfully sought clemency from the governor, was put to death by lethal injection. McLaughlin was pronounced dead at 6:51 p.m., the Missouri Department of Corrections said in a written statement. "I am sorry for what I did," wrote McLaughlin in their final statement, which was released by the Department of Corrections. "I am a loving and caring person." That's what they all say when they're about to be put on the slab. McLaughlin's execution, the first in the U.S. this year, is unusual. Executions of women in the United States are already rare. Well, here's the thing. Do I have to do this? Do I have to add 2 plus 2 to get the 4 instead of 5? Executions of women in the United States are already rare. Prior to McLaughlin's execution, just 17 had been put to death since 1976, when the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty after a brief suspension, according to the Death Penalty Information Center. The nonprofit organization confirmed McLaughlin is the first openly transgender person to be executed in the United States. McLaughlin, age 49, and their attorneys had petitioned Republican Governor Mike Parson for clemency, asking him to commute their death sentence. Aside from the fact the jury could not agree on the death penalty, they say McLaughlin has shown genuine remorse and has struggled with an intellectual disability, mental health issues, and a history of childhood trauma. This is the second time this week where someone has mentioned something about childhood trauma after they have committed a major crime. William Rick Singer, in that college admission scandal, they mentioned childhood trauma, which still blows my mind that they even brought that up. And now this situation with Amber McLaughlin. Is that the new mental health issue of saying everybody suffered a childhood trauma issue? Of course, that works for you if you're white. We know who that does not work for. Hint, hint, such as the demographic of the person that's speaking into the microphone right now that you hear. But in a statement Tuesday, Parsons' office announced the execution would move forward as planned. The family and loved ones of the victim, Beverly Gunther, deserve peace, the statement said. The state of Missouri will carry out McLaughlin's sentence according to the court's order, Parsons said, and deliver justice. McLaughlin, listed in court documents as Scott McLaughlin, had not initiated a legal name change or transition, and as a death sentence person was kept at Potosi Correctional Center near St. Louis, which housed male inmates. McLaughlin's federal public defender Larry Comp and the defender's office have said. So they were not in jail with women, which most likely is a good thing. McLaughlin was sentenced to death for Gunther's November 2003 murder, according to court records. The two were previously in a relationship, but they had separated by the time of the killing, and Gunther had received an order of protection against McLaughlin after she was arrested for burglarizing Gunther's home. Several weeks later, while the order was in effect, McLaughlin waited for Gunther outside the victim's workplace, court records say. McLaughlin repeatedly stabbed and violated Gunther. Prosecutors argued at trial, pointing in part to blood splatters in the parking lot and in Gunther's truck. A jury convicted McLaughlin of first-degree murder, forcible violation, and armed criminal actions, court records show. But when it came to a sentence, the jury was deadlocked. Most U.S. states with the death penalty require a jury to unanimously vote to recommend or impose the death penalty, but Missouri does not. According to state law, in cases where a jury is unable to agree on the death penalty, the judge decides between life imprisonment without parole or death. McLaughlin's child judge imposed the death penalty. If Parson were to grant clemency, McLaughlin's attorney argued he would not have subverted the will of the jury since the jury could not agree on a capital sentence. That, however, was just one of several grounds on which McLaughlin's attorney said Parson should grant clemency, according to the petition submitted to the governor. In addition to the issue of the deadlocked jury, McLaughlin's attorneys pointed to the struggles with mental health as well as a history of childhood trauma. McLaughlin has been quote-unquote consistently diagnosed with borderline intellectual disability and universally diagnosed with brain damage as well as fetal alcohol syndrome, the petition said. My thing is this: you've had all of that. When did all of this get quote-unquote diagnosed? Was that around back then, or this is just something that just popped up when you found out that I could be going on that gurney any day now? Because when you look at the stuff in the details of what led up to the murder of this woman, his ex or their ex, that doesn't spell out any type of trauma to me. That just spells out a psycho. And before they even said that they got this person on first degree anything, I kind of knew it when they said that they were practically going out to their place and in a way kind of stalking them. McLaughlin was quote-unquote abandoned by their mother and placed into the foster care system, and in one placement had feces thrust into their face, according to the petition. They later suffered more abuse and trauma, including being tased by the adoptive father, and battled depression that led to multiple suicide attempts. At trial, McLaughlin's jury did not hear expert testimony about the mental state at the time of Gunther's murder. That testimony, her attorney said, could have tipped the scales toward a life sentence by supporting the mitigating factors cited by the defense and rebutting the prosecution's claim McLaughlin acted with depravity of mind, that her actions were particularly brutal or wantonly vile, the only aggravating factor the jury found. A federal judge in 2016 vacated McLaughlin's death sentence due to ineffective counsel, court records show, citing the trial attorney's failure to present that expert testimony. That ruling, however, was later overturned by the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. McLaughlin's execution would highlight all the flaws of the justice system and would be a great injustice on a number of levels, her attorney told CNN previously. It will continue the systemic failures that existed throughout Amber's life, where no interventions occurred to stop and intercede to protect them as a child and teen. Comp said all that could go wrong and did go wrong for them. My thing is this: how do we really know that this person would have completely became a complete and upright citizen? After all, this person stabbed and violated their ex while they were still living as a man. As far as I'm concerned, this Scott McLaughlin, or the formerly Scott McLaughlin, was the one on trial. But because you have to go by whatever it is that they claim, Amber was on trial. Really the same person, if you put it plainly put. But we live in a ball of confusion nowadays. But yeah, I want to know what Hall T is going to have to say about this, if they've said anything at all, because they've been very, very quiet about this. And I'm not surprised at all. But I find it very interesting that they will speak out whenever something happens to them, or whenever they feel like they're like trans is being attacked or people are being transphobic and this and the third. Yet here you have a person who is trans, or was, who got executed because they took out their ex before they did, their little transitioning. And let's not talk about the other stories I've done in the past where you had people who live as quote unquote trans and was in these prisons with the women violating them and getting some of them pregnant. Remember that one I did about the one, I think it was in New Jersey? That's the one I'm referring to. They don't talk about that either. There's a lot of stuff they don't talk about, but they won't talk about it because, not because they don't know about it, because you can't tell me they don't, but because it doesn't fit their narrative. They have to, in order to continue to live and perpetuate yourself as the victim, you have to make everyone else the perpetrator while you remain the victim. You can never be the perp. Well, this right here is going in the history books, and there's not a damn thing that you can change about that.